Okay, so allow me to introduce myself. I'm Mike Blahnik. I am president of the Michigan chapter of ISPI. I'm also a performance consultant with Innovative Learning Group based out of Troy, Michigan. I'm excited to present and meet with everybody on the webinar this evening. Those of you who have come to chapter meetings recently, no doubt we've met. I look forward to seeing everyone who can make it at the Practitioners Forum, which is coming up in May on the third Thursday, which is May 19th.
That's right.
Denise, would you care to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Denise Schimmoeller, and I am the VP of Marketing for the ISPI Michigan chapter. And welcome to our webinar event. I am a talent development manager at Deloitte, and I look forward to spending the next hour and a half with you. And I'm going to shut off my webcam now. I told Mike I would I would try it out, and my trial is over. So here we go.
Thanks for being a good sport, Denise. So we've got about 20 people here on the webinar with us this evening, and thanks again for joining. To build a sense of community and just get to know each other a little bit better, I'd like to invite each of you to introduce yourself in the chat, maybe share one thing you're working on or who you're working with or for, and then maybe share one thing that you hope to learn from or get out of the webinar this evening. I'll give everybody a minute or two to type that in. Thanks.
So, Mike, are you planning on staying on video the entire time?
I'll turn it off.
So what we're looking for in the chat again is your company, your role at your company, and one thing you hope to get out of this webinar. Oh, we've got some comments coming in, Mike. Let's take a look. Thank you, Donna, for being the first one to put yourself out there. Well, wonderful. We look forward to teaching you more about performance improvement. Got some other ones coming in, Mike.
So we've got Kelly Unger from Ford Motor Company, IT Learning and Development, responsible for performance consulting and social and informal learning. You could have a partner in crime there, Denise.
Yeah. Becky, Director of Instructional Design at i3 Logic, welcome. We will talk about the standards of performance improvement, and if there's something that we don't cover, Becky, make sure that you ask us specific questions.
We've got Susan, performance consultant at Ford, working on a collaboration project. It looks like she's a fan of yours, Denise.
Yeah, we used to sit next to each other, actually. Welcome, Susan. Terry, welcome, from DFCU Financial, VP of Learning and Performance.
Great to see you, Terry. Thanks for coming. And we've got Kristen from Xerox, a curriculum manager, currently working on a leadership development strategy.
Vivian at Lake Trust Credit Union, welcome. I have one of my best friends that works there with you, so great place. Angie, welcome. Right Management.
And Karen Miller, looking for opportunities, and she's looking forward to reviewing the 10 standards. Thanks for joining us, Karen.
And we've got Patricia, welcome, from GM.
They're really coming in now. I can't keep up.
Now Vivian, Zaid, welcome. Robin, VP of Learning and Development at Alliance Catholic Credit Union. Oh, Vivian, I'll send you a chat.
Okay, I think that was, I don't know, some of you may have snuck through, but I think we got a good number of responses
Yeah.
there, and appreciate the lively chat. It's important to have an interesting webinar in this format, that we really do leverage that chat. So while I'm presenting, Denise is going to be taking a look at the chat and trying to keep the conversation going, and while she's presenting, I'll be monitoring the chat and trying to keep the conversation going. So feel free to use that as a communication tool to keep us on track, and also ask the questions and the things that you hope to learn about. So, welcome. The people here in the screenshot, or in the images here, they're performing their work, and in general, most people want to do good at their jobs, I would say. I know that certainly applies to me and to Denise. And based on the chat responses and the things that that you guys are talking about you're working on and the companies you work for, I know you guys not only concerned about your own performance but also team performance and organizational performance. So we're excited to dive deeper into the fundamentals of performance improvement tonight. So to kick us off, we're going to start with a review and discussion of the 10 standards of performance improvement. And later on, we'll get into some concepts, systems, and tools that can be used for performance improvement. And I'm sure for a lot of the people here in the audience, they're going to be familiar to you. Maybe we'll get some good reminders. Maybe there'll be some new insights on how to use the tools. But let's jump into the 10 standards. So performance. Oh, sorry. I have learning objectives first. So at the end of this presentation, you'll be able to recognize the 10 standards of performance improvement. You'll be able to define performance. You'll recognize the 4 levels of performance, recognize how inputs and processes influence results in a performance system, and you'll identify the drivers that enable or inhibit performance and results. For some of our savvy performance improvement people on the webinar, I bet by looking at the learning objectives, you can kind of think about what tools and techniques we're going to talk about. So as we get into the 10 standards of performance improvement, I think broadly, performance improvement has been described as a systematic and systemic identification and removal of barriers to individual and organizational performance. That's sort of the overarching concept behind the presentation tonight. So to set some expectations, this presentation was developed by ISPI International and provided to the chapters to use as a development tool for for local chapters to use with their members, or for guests that cared to learn more about performance improvement. That said, Denise and I have taken some liberties to make it maybe a little bit more contextual for those of us that are here in Michigan. If there's anybody on the meeting that's not from Michigan or not local to Southeast Michigan, could you just type in maybe where you're connecting from? I'm curious, because we talk quite a bit about virtual meetings. I'm interested just to know how wide our reach is. Thanks very much.
Griffin's calling in from Indianapolis.
Well, thanks for joining us. Okay, so as we talk about the standards of performance improvement, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with these standards, and they break into 2 broad categories, right? Principles and practices. And the principles are kind of the 4 standards under which performance improvement professionals do their work. And the remaining standards are practices. They focus on how we perform our work as our practice. Just to set some expectations, once we move on from kind of this discussion, a lot of the remaining time is going to focus mostly on the first 2 standards, focusing on results or outcomes and taking a systemic view. So a little bit of background about the standards themselves. I've got a ton of detail that was provided by International, but I'm going to copy edit it a little bit for you guys. The standards were developed by a team of over 30 performance improvement practitioners as a code of performance for PI, trying to drive some standardization into how we do our work. They wanted to differentiate performance improvement from other disciplines and also to guide practitioners in its use and in the use of performance improvement tools. So they established these 10 standards of performance improvement basically for the field. ISPI trying to get out there and set the standard for the field, and that was the intent. They form a basis of what we know works in the field of performance improvement, and it serves as a guide for sort of an effective performance improvement approach. So anybody have any questions about the standards? You want to type them into the chat. Is there one that you'd like to talk more deeply about?
Keeping in mind that one of the handouts we provided in the meeting notice for today is a copy of those 10 standards, a little bit more in detail than you see here on the screen. Give it another minute for any particular comments to come in.
Sure.
Areas of focus. It takes a few minutes of typing. I'm very patient. All right, here we go. What measures are being used for evaluating results and impact? I'll try to share some of that from my personal experience. Kristen, thanks for that. Mike, keep me honest and remind me. But actually, this is a really good segue into our next section.
Are there any other questions that we want to note for later to make sure we cover?
Or any of the standards that are of particular interest to you?
I'll just say broadly to get to Kristen's question a little bit. Oftentimes it's compared to the organizational strategy, right, Denise? Like what's important to the organization, and ultimately why are we trying to close a gap, right? So
yep.
Those are the types of results that we're often shooting for, and the measures for those can be standard in some industries and across industries, but sometimes it's unique to a given organization. So whether it's bottom line or turnover or something like that, those are the broad buckets, but it can be more specific when you look at departments or teams, depending on the scope of your work and your project.
Yeah, that is a good segue into the next section, actually. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and move on? And we're going to start with the first standard that you see there, which is focus on results or outcomes. So we start with the end in mind. We don't focus on problems or opportunities, but on the actual goal or goals of the organization. So where do you find this type of information? Where do you find out where your organization wants to be headed, or even individuals or departments? Where do you start seeking that information? And I'll take some quick answers, and I'm talking one-word answers in text chat. Just a little bit more about the position that I'm in Deloitte. I work primarily for our employees, and the group that I primarily focus on are tax professionals. So yes, Karen, you hit it right on the head. I don't know if something else came before that. Oh,
yeah,
yes,
we've got a couple of good answers here.
That's exactly where I look for information. Strategic plans, asking department managers. It could be, what are the customers looking for? It's whatever those stakeholders are looking for. It could be at the organizational level. It could be at the individual level. It could be at the department level. It really depends on what type of level you're specifically dealing with. But as we'll talk about in this presentation, we look at things as a system. So it's not, even though you may be just focused on an individual or department, you have to also consider all the points that touch them. So some examples that they provided for us are reduction in cost, an increase in the level of quality, reduced staffing costs or cycle time or time to market, increase in market share. These could all be things that the organization or department is trying to achieve. Also, another question that you could ask to get on the outcomes that you're looking for is, what should be different when we finish doing what is needed? Or how will we know that we achieved the results?
Yeah, that's a great question, Denise. I love to ask that one anytime, working in partnership with my clients. I know you were asked to roll out a training or to move this needle, but how do we know when we get there, right? What does that measure look like? And I just want to point out the images on the slides. They were drawn by a good friend of mine through ISPI. Her name's Lynn Carney. She calls herself a visual explainer. And so as you see the artwork here, I hope that it resonates, with what we're talking about.
She also does the design salons at the ISPI Performance Improvement Conference.
Very fun sessions.
I knew those drawings looked familiar, so thanks for that, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk about the word results.
All right, so results. They are accomplishments, completed work. It is something that's valued by the receiver of that work, also known as outcomes, outputs that meet a customer or organizational need. So you're going to see throughout this presentation, we had to find an example that would resonate with all of us, and all of us eat at restaurants. So we're going to talk restaurants during this, and I apologize because I know it's not necessarily a corporate setting, and a lot of you seem to have come from a corporate setting. But just so we have something that we're all familiar with and a place that we all frequent, let's think of work that a chef does at a restaurant. So the business goal of a restaurant is to grow their business, providing an excellent dining experience. If the chef and restaurant are phenomenal, then the diner, which is us in this circumstance, or that stakeholder, that customer, values the meal and the experience for the price paid. And the result for the chef in the restaurant is repeat business, new customers, and people go ahead and they talk about that great experience that they had. But let's say the restaurant staff is phenomenal, and the chef is inconsistent, and therefore the food is less than excellent. Will that restaurant meet its business goal? It won't. So in a fine restaurant, the value is in the quality of the food and the experience. So think of it as, think of another example, and we're talking about, we were initially talking about a fine restaurant, so let's think about a different restaurant experience. Think about a fast food restaurant. Customers value something different in that experience than they would in a fine dining restaurant. So in a fast food restaurant, they're expecting economical, convenient, fast, clean. So a little bit different than that phenomenal experience, delicious dinner, etc. Okay, either way, if it's a fine restaurant or a fast food restaurant, the results are impacted by the performance of a person or the organization as a whole. So that chef experience could happen in either, although the outcomes that we're trying to achieve are different. All right.
So those are results.
And now what is performance? So performance is a work activity plus those results that we just talked about. So let me give an example of this. So answering the phone is an activity. Think of a customer service agent. Making a sales call is an activity. However, answering a call and resolving a customer problem, which is an outcome or result, is performance. Or making a sales call and getting an appointment with a decision maker is performance. So you need both the activity and the result in order to get the performance. Performance is really misunderstood by a lot of people because they use behavior or activity to mean performance. So make sure that when you're defining performance, that you're thinking of performance outcomes that you want within your organization, that you're including both that activity as well as results.
That's right. So basically, activity without results is just activity, right?
Yep.
Difficult to measure, difficult to improve it.
Yeah, think of it as just running around in a circle and you're just not getting anywhere because you never gave yourself that destination, that outcome, that result that you wanted, although you are getting yourself very busy.
or exercise.
Yeah, you are just getting exercise.
Stress relief. So here we've got a break for a little bit of some interaction, I guess. And given that this is one way, we're not gonna unmute everybody on the call. I'd like to use the chat window here. Can you think about one activity you regularly do at home or work, and what's the result of that activity? Feel free to write it in your handout, and also please share it in the chat box.
And so for those of you who are using your handouts, we're on the third page of the handout. If you're taking any type of notes, there's a good space on that page.
Angie came up with my activity.
Is it dishwashing?
Yeah, dishwashing.
Oh my gosh, that was the first thing that came to mind for me too.
Yeah. So washing dishes, right, is an activity, but washing dishes and then having clean dishes that my wife doesn't ask me to wash again, that's a result, and that's valuable to me because I don't have to do it again. It's valuable to her because the dishes are clean. So that's performance. Laundry, clean clothes. There's another good one, Becky.
Excuse me. Dishes is our least favorite activity.
So I don't know. I'm kind of different in that regard. I would say I kind of like being able to zone out and wash the dishes, you know, and maybe turn on a podcast or something like that and just focus on that kind of mindless activity, knowing that eventually I'll get done and there'll be clean dishes.
It's my 4-year-old's favorite thing to do.
Oh, yeah?
He's really good at it, too.
But are the dishes clean when he's done?
Yeah, he's really good at it.
So that's performance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting example, studying and getting good grades. So good grades is a result? I think I can agree with that. Because you can count good grades, you know, like it's valuable.
You need to know how you get a 4-year-old to do dishes. I don't know. He is obsessed with it. He's obsessed with all cleaning activity. When he was 2, we had to buy him a broom. And that was his Christmas present. And no, we're not into child labor. It's all through his own volition. That's funny. All right. So yeah, a lot of those examples, there is a receiver of that accomplishment, whether it's you or your family. They all benefit from a clean house, laundry, clean clothes, clean dishes, etc. And there's a value associated with those results. So that also really tells you, you know, do I have that performance there? Do I have that activity in that result? All right, so I think we are ready to move on, Mike.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about the 4 levels of performance, and I'm going to spend some time defining each of these. Most organizations try to improve performance at the worker level. So you can see that's the very lowest level there. And they're not focused on the work, workplace, and world. All those W words, you can get a little tongue-tied there. A lot of organizations assume if employees did everything right, the results would improve. But there's 4 levels, and any one of them can impede results. So things happening at the world level will impact the worker, and the worker has little to no control over it. So you do need to look at all 4 levels when you're looking at performance. So let me define each of the 4, and then we'll go into an example for each of the levels as well. So the worker level. The worker level is the skills, motivations, and actions of individuals and teams. So think of it as a waiter, a head chef, team of chefs, and those are all workers within a restaurant. We've got the farmer there who's bringing in the organic produce. Mm-hmm. Really like his shirt.
Right. You got the chef who's, the chef who's preparing it, the sous chefs who are getting the ingredients ready, and ultimately the server, who brings it to the table. It's not about the title of the workers, but how the workers do their job and the types of services and products or support they provide, right?
So at your particular company or organization, if you could type quickly an example of someone at the worker level in the text chat for us. Yeah, so programmer, thanks Mike.
You're welcome.
A teller, developer, those are all great examples. Commercial relationship manager.
That one's important.
Yeah, so keep these in mind. I'm hoping that you're drawing parallels and taking notes of how this translates our restaurant examples into your own organization to make it real for you. Call center advisor, thanks Patricia. All right, let's move forward and define the work level. So the work level is the design of work tasks and processes and includes cross-functional processes. So the design of work on factory floors, that's crucial in making products efficiently and cost-effectively. Then, we have other folks that do professional services, like what work and processes do they do? They're advising clients. That's the world of Deloitte that I come from. So if you're thinking of cross-functional processes, I'll give you a pharmaceutical example, and I'll stay away from restaurants for just a moment. Could include product testing, a clinical trial, which is done by 2 different department areas, but they're cross-functional and they're reliant on one another. They require tasks to be completed by individuals in harmony with others. So a lot of times at Deloitte, we might go to a client and advise them on tax issues and find out that they're about to merge with another company. So we might need to bring in other merger and acquisition specialists to assist, and it becomes more of a cross-functional project for us. It's no longer just a tax advisory project. That's an example for us. Can you think of anything at the work level? Oh, and Kelly, no, we haven't gotten to the workplace yet. We're still at the work level.
So at the work level here at ILG, oftentimes building a course, right? Building a training, building a performance support solution doesn't just happen in one work stream, right? Like it's a cross-functional process between maybe a salesperson finding the opportunity, a project manager building a team together to work with the client, and then individual team members or groups of team members working together to build that that course or that solution out.
Yeah, any learning solution really is a cross-functional project, right? Or project or work. Mm-hmm. Let's use the word work, Denise, because you're involving like subject matter specialists from other areas of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Great examples. Thank you. All right, let's talk about the workplace level. So the workplace level is the design of the organization, its governance, its policies, strategies, its culture, all of which can promote or impede performance. So there could be policies in place that, you know, keep people from not wanting to perform to the level you need them to, or
Sure.
Of course, one does not come to mind after I said
well,
that.
no. Let's think about it the other way. Culturally, a lot of organizations support creativity or innovation, right? It's like baked into how they work together, like Apple or Google or some of those companies that you hear about like that, where from an organizational culture standpoint, the culture is actually kind of filtered into their processes and how they schedule meetings and approach projects and things like that. So really enabling people to think outside the box when so many organizations don't even really let their employees open the box, let alone think outside of it.
Right, policies that make them more innovative or agile. So it's a great point.
So Donna has a great example here. It gets into the world level a little bit, but the regulations and policies that an organization will put in place, to protect themselves as a banking organization, that can affect the culture, the policies, the procedures as well. So that kind of, I would say, straddles the line between workplace and world, but if you're looking at what it does to the organization, definitely in the workplace. And correct me if I'm wrong, Denise.
Well, no. I was just thinking if you're talking about external, like policy, government policy,
Right.
That is more the world level, which we haven't gotten into just yet. But the regulatory,
right?
But it does influence, like
putting a policy in place to be compliant, right?
Right.
And then holding people accountable to that policy.
Right. Say if you had a policy across your workforce that they were only allowed to take 1 week of vacation the entire year, and they were not going to get overtime on holidays. That is your new policy. Think of that in terms of what that does to the culture of your workplace. Now, you used to give everybody 3 weeks of vacation, and they used to have 10 holidays, and now you're just going down to 1 week. I know it's a really drastic response, but it affects those attitudes. It's going to affect performance and ultimately not get you the results you need, because I'm guessing an organization that does something like that, which is pretty ludicrous, is going to have some high turnover.
Sure.
So. All right, why don't we move on to the world level, the last level there. So the world level, I think of it as impact outside of your organization. This could be the competitive business environment. It could be regulatory. It could be societal expectations. A lot of factors that an organization does not necessarily control, but they have to pay attention to them. I know some of you have joined us from the automotive industry. You know, in the last 10, 20 years, the rising cost of fuels, emissions has caused a lot of government regulation, which has influenced how we have to innovate,
mm-hmm.
And what kinds of cars we sell, how many kinds of those cars that we sell, how we do design.
Yeah.
So think of that. That's a great example of a world impact on performance.
Right. You can look at that another way. It's not just the government that's going to that's kind of putting that in place. It's also us as consumers, right? Being more aware of our impact on the environment and our footprint, so to speak, pushing car makers, to provide more diverse options.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great. That's a great example. We want to keep the ice in the North and South Poles.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Any other examples that you can think of? I have a lot of, we've got some folks in the banking industry. I know there's quite a lot that's happened there. Mortgage companies as well in the last 10, 15 years. So that's another great example of a place that is impacted by a lot of regulation. Almost every industry in some way, shape, or form is impacted by Sarbanes-Oxley. So there's another government regulation put in place. Yes, Susan, I want to hear more about the disruption. Sustainable farming processes, that has impacted a lot of industries. I don't know if you've noticed in the last 2 years, if you go into a Kroger, you go into a Meijer, how many organic products are available versus what there were previously, and that again is a response to the world level of folks wanting that type of product.
Yeah, even the packaging of the products too, how much that's changed, recently.
Yeah, to have more recyclable goods. All right, so I think that's a great explanation, if I do say so myself.
No one can argue with you. So.
Workplace and world. Oh no, they can express their discontent on that text chat. Let's go ahead and move on to our next activity, Mike.
Okay.
And we kind of did this already as we were going through this. Choose one of those, worker, work, workplace, world. Actually, don't choose worker because we already did this in text chat. Choose work, workplace, or world. And in your particular company, tell us an example of performance. Again, I don't choose worker because we've kind of talked about those different workers already. So work, workplace, or world.
There's also space in your handout to write this down as you think about the 4 levels and your role at your organization and maybe the projects that you're working on. We want to improve performance in this group of engineers or something like that. Well, do they know what they need to be able to do? Are they put in position to be able to do it? And are the teams built in the right way so that they can do they can work effectively?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that's on page 4 of your handout if you're taking notes there. So we're looking for examples of performance by work, workplace, or world. Now remember, performance is activity as well as results, so we don't want to just include results there.
Some really good chat discussion going on.
Anything pop out at you, Mike?
So I was reading Susan's thoughts on disruption, and I have to scroll down to see the actual comments here. So Connie's got some interesting thoughts here. Workplace, leadership's treatment of workers, saying one thing and doing another, impacts culture.
Yeah, I think that's a great example.
Of workplace.
Like, and we were actually discussing that one yesterday.
During our practice?
Yeah. Thank you, Connie.
So oftentimes one of the things that we hear or that people might offer is strategy being offered as an example of a work level. But strategy isn't necessarily a work level, isn't a work level performance. It's more workplace level because it's setting that strategy out and organizing the company in a certain direction.
It could be the act of creating the strategy.
So if you're part of the strategy group, I got into that argument with the person who wrote this presentation.
And you open that can of worms again. Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I don't know what to say. Okay. Well, Mike, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you. Oh, thank you, Terry, for that Oh, interesting. That's a great example, the phishing emails protecting organization information system. Okay, so why don't we move on to the second performance improvement standard, which is take a systemic view. And one of the best ways to do that is using the performance system, which Mike is really geeked to talk about, so I am going to turn it over to him.
Thanks, Denise. So those of you who are familiar with the performance system, maybe by the name the Total Performance System, developed by Dale Brethauer, it's easy for me to kind of geek out on this tool because as I was learning about performance improvement, in college, this was the model that when it clicked for me, I kind of knew this was an area I wanted to work, and I wanted to use ideas like this to help make people's lives better. And so I actually had the good fortune in Philadelphia to meet Dale Brethauer for the first time. And it was like a kid meeting Batman, like is how I felt. So just picture that in your mind. You saw me for a second on the webcam. I was like starstruck when I met Dale for the first time, and I had read so much of his work, and I studied under one of his first PhD students at Western. So the reason the screen is blank right now is because this system can be pretty complex. The model looks pretty complex, but we're gonna break it down. We're gonna walk through it bit by bit. So we're gonna break it down, and you'll see, what you'll see is the familiar systems model with inputs, processes, and outputs. So this version is a bit more detailed to help people understand the dynamics of a system with the people in it. I'm going to try and relate this to an example with a restaurant. So I'll try not to make a total mess of this. We're going to start with the end in mind, the receiving system, which drives everything else. Like earlier when we were talking about results and them being valuable, what ultimately determines value is your receiving system. So that might be stakeholders, that might be customers, that might be governments or external agencies. There's even, if you want to get really into it, your employees themselves can be a receiving system for what you're doing, and often one that gets overlooked. So for this walkthrough, given that it is dinner time, I'm going to use a nice restaurant as our example here. So picture Morton's Steakhouse. Everyone familiar with that? This was Denise's suggestion. So I like Morton's quite a bit. It wouldn't have been my first choice, but we felt like if there were some people from, say, Indianapolis on the web meeting, they wouldn't be wondering what we're talking about if we pick some chic Detroit area restaurant. So who are the receiving system or stakeholders at Morton's Steakhouse? They'd be customers, right? They'd be the employees. They'd be stakeholders, right? Maybe the franchise owner. I don't know if Morton's Steakhouse is publicly traded under a holding company or something like that. But if they are, investors or stakeholders would be part of the receiving system. So they're the entities that receive value due to the work that's being done at Morton's Steakhouse. Broad way to look at it. Next, we'll talk about results. So the end products and services delivered to the customer, ultimately they're valued and paid for. Results include outcomes for other stakeholders in the receiving system, right? And if those stakeholders are dissatisfied, you have unsatisfactory results and a problem to solve. So, a lot of systems, they do a good job of meeting the needs of any one component of their receiving system, but sometimes at the fault of another component of their receiving system. So maybe the meals are a fantastic value, but they're not paying anyone, a fair wage. So the customers are happy with the value of the meal they received, but ultimately they have high turnover because people find more profitable opportunities elsewhere. So and other results that stakeholders want at Restaurant X could be profitable returns, right? So Denise, you mentioned investors. So whether it's stakeholders or owners, profitable returns. We have high volume at the restaurant, but we're not making money on our meals or on our drinks or whatever the case may be, not returning monetary value, then ultimately that's an unsatisfactory result for financial stakeholders. You also have regulating bodies, so here in Michigan or other states across this great nation, there's some sort of property tax or sales tax or service tax. So if the volume, if the volume at the restaurant is high and some of those taxes are related to the volume, then ultimately the state makes a little bit more money. If it's in a certain neighborhood where property tax is higher, that local government wants somebody on that property, right, so that they can collect that property tax. It's just another example of results that are valuable to receiving systems. Before I get bogged down, let's move on to outputs. So individual outputs, services, sub-assemblies, other items produced by the work that ultimately lead to those results. So a freshly cooked steak is an output. A steak sold and paid for is a result. A decision to open a restaurant is an output. A profitable restaurant is a result, is another way to look at that. So I don't know if I did a great job explaining that, but in the chat, can you think of any examples of an output and a result at Morton's Steakhouse? I'll give you a minute to type some stuff up.
You're looking for an output and a result?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You got one?
No. Not off the top of my head.
Who's hungry? Great tasting food that results in no more appetite.
We were talking like a result being healthy customers as a result of food that is cooked to the right quality, temperature,
Sure.
etc. You don't want anyone having food poisoning.
That's right.
Which would be the adverse result.
Mm-hmm. So output is not necessarily it's a fine line. That's a great question, Vivian. Is output the activity that brings about the result? So an output is a result of the it's what drives value, which is the key part of the sorry, I got distracted there. I'm going to mute that. Okay, so the output is a result of the processes that we're going to talk about next, and whether or not it qualifies as a result in the eyes of performance improvement depends on whether or not the receiving system values it. So it's a very complex thing to try and explain, but I hope I didn't totally mess that up.
I like to think of the result being like the overall experience of someone in the receiving system versus, a good salad,
Mm-hmm.
which is more of that individual product or service, or an excellent service experience is like part of that overall like result of a fine dining experience.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about how we talked about results earlier, results are the work accomplishments or completed results, or completed work, sorry, that are valued by the receiver of that work. So if you're just doing it and there's no value, it's an output that's not a result. But if it's with a restaurant example, it's harder to think about outputs that aren't valuable, I would say. So let's say they produced an overcooked steak or a steak that wasn't cooked to specification. That's still an output, but it doesn't qualify as a result.
Yeah, because it's not something that's valued by the receiving system.
Exactly. All right. Next, we're going to talk about processes. So the methods, the work streams, and sequences of operations that we referred to a few minutes ago as work level. So this is how materials and information are turned into products and services, then sold, delivered, billed, and collected on. So what kind of processes would you expect at a restaurant? Feel free to type it in the chat. Seating and hostess, that's a good example. So oftentimes people will focus on the actual food delivery or things like that. But it's a complex, it can be a process to, like let's say you're in call ahead seating or something like that, and you call ahead and say, I'm going to have a party of 8. The hostess writes it down, ask someone to prep a table, and then get you sat, in the area that you want. Food preparation safety is a great example, Sade. Thanks for sharing that, because there's a whole process. Like let's assume maybe that food doesn't turn over as quickly as they originally hoped. They've got processes and procedures in place to make sure that they're not serving serving food that has outlasted its healthy life cycle.
Yeah. Another example could be how you evaluate your server staff. That's a process.
Sure.
Whether it's secret shopper or their restaurant manager.
Mm-hmm. Maintenance, cleaning crew, absolutely. So maintenance especially, because oftentimes, how do you hear about a maintenance opportunity? Your customer tells you, right? Like, oh, this table's wobbly. I don't like this table because it wobbles. I want to move to a different table. They tell the server, right? They don't tell the person who's going to come and fix the table. Then the server's got to go and find the manager, right? Manager now knows the request, and then the manager goes and finds, the bar back or the somebody else that's actually going to fix the table or shove another shim under them, under the leg or whatever the case may be.
It's really funny you mentioned that, because as an aside, I was at Rainforest Cafe on Friday with my kids, and have you ever looked around that place and wondered how the heck they clean it? And I, of course, was doing this as I was eating, and I'm like, don't think about this, just enjoy your food. Anyway, very critical process to me. Cleaning tables for the next parties to turning over your tables in a timely fashion too, right?
Right.
Have you ever? I've been a server, so I've had those parties that sit at their table for 3-4 hours, and you're like, I'm losing money here.
Yeah. I was in the food service industry for about a week. About 1 week, yeah. Didn't last too long. It was with the Western Michigan University catering.
Oh.
Catering, yeah.
College students.
Yeah, that didn't. I mean, it was a fun group of people, to work with. But then they were like, you have to pass this test or whatever, and I was like, this isn't worth my time. I'm just gonna go find another job.
And here you are today.
Yeah, that worked out. All right, getting sidetracked here. Next, we're going to talk about inputs. So inputs are, think of them as the resources required to produce the products and services. So in a typical organization, that includes information, materials, labor, time, money. Those oftentimes raw materials that are needed to, make that table, or that's the easiest one. Like the wood to actually make a table, or the manufacturing materials to to produce a product or an output. But if you think about inputs at a restaurant, I mean, what comes to mind? You got to have food, right? You got to have the materials, right? The equipment.
Labor.
Labor. You got to have people there. Employees. There you go, Donna. So those inputs feed into the processes, which when they're working effectively produce outputs that are valuable enough to be considered results in the eyes of the receiving system. Next, we're going to talk about conditions or business environment. Denise touched on this a little bit when she was talking about the world level, right? So what's going on outside of the organization that they're outside the org's control or difficult for a client within the organization to control. So if you think about a restaurant, what's outside of the chef's control? It's raining, or something like that. And there's no one sitting out on the patio, so now it's like really crowded in the restaurant.
Mad cow disease.
Oh, so yeah, if you're a steakhouse, what happens if people stop eating beef?
Yeah. Everyone's vegetarian.
Yeah, or if there's a shortage of beef or something along those lines. Culturally, we move away from that. Like that would really impact a place like Morton Steakhouse, right? So government laws and regulations are a good example here. Trends in the economy or legal precedents, sociocultural shifts. Donna pointed out the Department of Health, so if they change their regulations or something like that, tighten their restrictions, or that's going to impact operations. Market forces such as competition. So what happens to Morton's if if a steakhouse opens up across the street, and how does that impact their resources, our inputs, and their processes?
The minimum wage. That's a good example too.
Yep. So facilities can be outside of the chef's control, right? If you think about it, it might be within the control of some of the people in the receiving system, some of the groups within the receiving system. They have maybe the capital to update facilities or not. But oftentimes, for the people working within the performance system, facilities themselves are outside their control. And that can include capital equipment, so maybe the grill or the refrigerator or something like that, the freezer, for instance.
Yeah, Susan, that's another good example of the availability of certain foods.
Yeah, so like
I was very upset in Chicago when they had legislation, and it didn't last actually. I think it's already gone. It came and went within a year or two, that they outlawed the sale of faux gras in their restaurants. I love duck liver, so had a little bit of a problem with that. But it's bad.
Well, they heard your complaints, Denise.
Yeah, there was an outcry. In any case.
All right, so then next we're going to focus on feedback on the value of the results. So in the way I learned about this model, I call this the external feedback loop. It's feedback from the receiving system on the value of the results. So let's think about the restaurant. Increased sales or many customers leaving, those are both forms of feedback. Other forms of feedback could be high turnover or efforts to unionize, regulatory fines from the health agency or the Department of Health, right, for code violations. Those are all external feedback loops. I was in Philly last week for the ISPI conference, and everyone was raving about one of the like go-to spots for Philly cheesesteaks. And I don't remember which one it was, Pat, Jim, or Gino. I don't recall. But I asked a local, like, okay, how far away is this cheesesteak place everybody's been talking about? And he's like, oh, you don't want to go there, man. They just had 9 health code violations, 7 of them serious. They don't resolve them within the next 2 weeks. They're going to get shut down. Like,
oh my God.
He's like, I wouldn't send my worst enemy there.
You don't remember which one it was?
I want to say, I don't want to say which one it was.
Oh, because you're not sure.
I don't want
Okay,
to say it because I don't remember which one it was.
It was Kelly.
I think it was one of those two, right, Kelly? Because they're the ones that are like across the street from each other and hate each other or whatever. Yeah, it was one of those two. I don't remember which one it was. But think about that, you know, like the external feedback loop there being the fines and sanctions, but then also
and you're contributing to it.
Decreased customers, you know, like that.
Yeah.
Kelly, I had no idea you were from Pennsylvania. That explains a lot. I'm just joking, Kelly. So the point being here is that feedback often comes from outside the system, and feedback like that often is best used to maybe revise strategy, update policy, or you know, update long-range plannings. You know, like our customers are telling us this. You know, like to take it to local, our customers are telling us we want you know, hybrid cars, or you know, so then go out and we make cars that have better fuel economy or are less harmful to the environment, things like that. That's feedback from the receiving system. There's another feedback loop though, performance feedback. So this is information generated during the work processes and as work products are inspected, maybe quality control, quality assurance for those of you who are maybe developing training and things like that. That's an internal feedback loop, or performance feedback as it's called out on this slide.
Well, in learning, we call that formative evaluation.
Oh, okay.
Because it's the evaluation that you do prior to finalizing your learning solution.
Okay.
So,
and then to take that and try and contextualize it against the external feedback loop, is that like your evaluations after the training?
Yeah, that's summative evaluation.
Yeah, okay. That's
and
an
then
interesting
if you
corollary. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the interesting thing about performance feedback or internal feedback loops is most feedback actually falls into this category because it's kind of easier for the organization to gather it and control it and to monitor it. So a lot of times this feedback should point out ways we could revise work design or procedures or processes, but sometimes you're so busy or people are so tapped out that no one's paying attention to this type of performance feedback and making adjustments to work processes real time. So it's often easier to respond to feedback that comes from external, even though we get more internal feedback.
Well, and Six Sigma is another great example of a performance feedback that you do internal to the organization, because you're trying to improve a process and make it better incrementally.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so to take it back here and kind of tie a bow on the performance system, who might give or receive feedback at Morton Steakhouse? Feel free to type it up in the chat. So the server, absolutely. The owner, manager, absolutely. Health inspectors. All right, you guys definitely got it. Who in the webinar, who is familiar with the performance system prior to this little exercise here? Okay. All right. Well.
Susan was, Terry.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, because
Connie, Kelly.
Just a model that has always made a lot of sense to me, and I'm glad to hear that people are still using it or still see the value in it. So I think, Denise, we need to keep moving, right?
We do.
Okay. So the next thing we were going to have you guys do is in the meeting notice, we shared a link to a YouTube video, and we'd like to send everybody off in their own direction for about 2.5 minutes to watch that video, and then we'll come together and talk about it. While you're watching it, keep in mind the performance system graphic in your handout, and look for items as the video is playing, conditions, inputs, process, outputs, results, receiving system. Does everybody have the link? I hope so.
Yeah, you want to stop it at the 2-minute, 20-second mark. So when you're done, if you could just put a done in the text chat so we know to move on.
Okay, most people should be wrapping up. I can't believe only one pickle either. That is pretty terrible. But it's easy when you watch the video, right, to know like what's really going on there. So let's just to talk about it briefly, because I think most of you guys kind of get why we watched it. What were some of the inputs that you saw, just rapid fire in the chat?
Yeah, we're going to rapid fire through these questions so we can. Condiments. Oh,
I'm cheating.
Example, Mike.
I'm cheating. I'm just trying to get him going. So there was condiments. There were, the burgers, right? The buns, the bread warmer.
Obviously, not enough pickles.
Not nearly enough pickles. paper wrappers. So yeah, a mix of food and then also tools and resources.
Save that one for the next question, Connie.
So what are some processes that you saw?
Connie says washing hands.
Yeah, hand washing. That was a whole little demonstration there, right, about how to do that. There's also the process overall, right? Building a burger. He does it, and he's like a magician, right, with his hands, and he's so quick and good. And then the new person starts, and yeah, who wants to eat that cheeseburger?
Okay, it wasn't that bad, but I thought it was interesting, the ketchup to mustard ratio. But anyway.
Yeah. Order to build. Yep. So cooking burgers, assembling burgers, stuff like that, right? And the outputs, I'm sure everybody kind of noticed some outputs.
Yeah, in this case, the output was not the perfect burger.
The imperfect burger.
Yeah.
And then with practice, though, you could see a pretty well wrapped and well put together burger, right? Like,
yeah.
It was the difference between the two. So if you guys were the customer, I'm sure you wouldn't like the hamburger the trainee made, right? The result, not really valued by the receiving system, right? Unless maybe you're really super hungry, I guess.
Yeah.
Or you don't like pickles, or you really love ketchup.
Or you're eating your burger behind the wheel and you've already driven away from the place.
Yeah. So then let's think about the performance system. What should be considered for the worker? So, I mean, making sure those inputs were available when they were needed, making sure there's feedback on performance, right? And then making sure the worker really knows the requirements, particularly the hand washing, right? And if you think about the work being done, the processes, there's feedback to team on performance, there's feedback from the customer, communication to slow down burger making or speed it up, communication of availability of tools and inputs, and then ensuring cleanliness, right, of the workspace and the tools. And then in terms of the workplace, and with the performance system in mind, what could be considered the cleanliness of the food, right? Customer, worker safety.
Yeah, making sure the ketchup is full, that there are enough quality pickles available, and buns warmed. So, yep.
All right, let's keep going. Oh, I gotta get past the video. One moment. There we go. So now that we understand the concept of a system, let's look at the things that drive performance within a system. And I'm going to hand this off to Denise.
Okay. My screen is not changing.
Interesting.
And I'm in the meeting. And I assume that's everybody else's case.
Huh. If you guys can't see the outline for the 6 boxes model, can you say so on the?
Yeah, the slide title should be performance drivers.
Yeah, I don't see it.
That's very weird. Are you still the presenter?
Here, let me make you presenter, maybe.
Oh, no. Hold on. Let me get to the right slide if you're going to do that. Did you make me presenter?
No, not yet. You ready?
Go ahead. All right, so now I need to share my screen. Thank you for joining us on this journey. I'm ready to show my screen. Yes, I'm ready to show my screen. All right, now does everybody see performance drivers on their screen?
I do.
Yes, yay.
Yay.
Well, thank you for your patience during that technical difficulty. All right, so Mike mentioned his hero, Dale. My heroes are, in particular, Thomas Gilbert and Carl Binder. Please don't tell Dr. Mosley. Although I do appreciate the HBT model, he was one of my advisors at Wayne State University. So what we're going to take a look at is the behavioral engineering model, talk about performance drivers, also referred to as influences on behaviors. So these are the things, again, that drive performance. You're going to see that the model is divided into two rows. The top row is your external drivers, so what an organization provides to performers, and the bottom row is your internal drivers, and those are the things that a performer brings to the job. So external is information, resources, incentives, and these are slightly worded differently based on, if you're looking at 6 boxes or the behavioral engineering model. The internal skills, knowledge, capabilities, motives, again, those are the performer brings to the job. So think back to what we saw, and let's examine the performance drivers related to making hamburgers at McDonald's. Okay, so what would the hamburger maker need from information to be successful in making a hamburger?
Recipes.
Excellent.
So the ketchup to mustard ratio.
So what the process was, yep. Yep, really what we're looking for in the information box, that external driver, is what's the goal? The goal here is to make a burger. Oh, the expectations, the guidelines of what a good burger looks like, what a bad burger looks like. That feedback mechanism that's in place. Like, did she do a good job the first time? No. And hopefully, if we had watched into further into that 2 minutes 20 seconds, we would have found out that she was given that feedback. I don't think they went that far. For resources, what we're looking at there is the materials, the info, equipment, space and time, work design. So think of it this way. The ketchup was the very first thing that you put on the bun. So the ketchup condiment was all the way to the left top. Like, what if it was behind her, way to the right? Like, is that a good work design? Is that a good design of space? Would that be an efficient use of that burger maker's time to reach behind herself? And also, it's not ergonomically correct. So look at it that way, too. So that's all part of the resources. What if those papers that you wrap the hamburger weren't readily accessible? All part of the resources. And then the last external is, again, compensation. But don't just think of it in terms of rewards or money. It could also be recognition, non-financial. It could be performance-based. It could not be. Depends on that particular workplace. So those are those incentives. It could be paid time off. It could be a certain benefit that you offer to an employee, whether it's health insurance or a fitness membership or something like that. There's some crazy benefits out there. I'm sure, like being part of a banking or a credit union, you have benefits that that offer you discounts on accounts or things of that nature. Okay. All right, so why don't we move on? So now that you have a clear understanding what those are at the external level, let's take a look at what's going on internally with the performer or the worker. So skills and knowledge is the first one, and what is also known as box 4. So this is the experience, the models, the how-to, the performance support. Interestingly, a lot of performance technologists come come to the table with a learning background, so they're most familiar with this box. You probably are also familiar with this box from the perspective of any time a lot of organizations have a problem, they like to jump here first and tell you to offer more training.
Mm-hmm.
So
we just need to train them.
Yeah. The problem is, again, like I said at the very beginning of this presentation, with the performer, not necessarily with the workplace, which, again, is more of the external area. All right, so moving on, capability. This is also the motivation, or actually, I'm sorry, motivation is the next one. This is the mental, physical, emotional capacity to do the work. Are you capable of doing the work? And then finally, motivation. Do you have a burning desire, willingness to do the work? I haven't been catching up with the chat as I've been talking, Mike. Is there anything that's come in that...
I asked folks if they tended to get asked to help in box 4 most often. Seemed like there was a mix.
Gotcha. So if anything is lacking in any of these 6 boxes, the performance will most likely be negatively affected. If you've got someone in a job that's not willing to do that work, like Mike wasn't willing to work for the catering company at Western Michigan.
Right, they couldn't have paid me enough. They couldn't have trained me enough.
Like, he's a goner. Yep. Fortunately, he weeded himself out. But anyway.
I didn't bring anybody with me. So.
Yeah. So, like I said, this is referred to often as the behavioral engineering model. Carl Binder has the 6 boxes, 6boxes.com. It's a great resource for you and your organization. He calls these behavioral influences versus performance drivers. But, yeah, I mean, they're just slightly wording of the same thing. A lot of times, or most often, box 1, which is information, expectations, feedback, is where you will find more problems than box 2, box 3, 4, 5, 6 consecutively. So there's a method to the order in which these are displayed on your screen. Gary Rumler also talks about, oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. I'll save that for the next slide. I'm like moving ahead of myself. And I need to actually move to the next slide. Yeah, page down, page down. Okay, now my slide's not wanting to move. Okay, there we go. Gary Rumler talks about in his anatomy of performance model, this world, workplace, worker, and the various performance levels. He just has a different model of explaining performance and the drivers behind performance. So there's another name if you're interested in doing more research in the human performance technology space. Questions about the 6 boxes or performance drivers, whatever we're calling them today, or questions about the workplace world that I went over at the beginning of the presentation. Website for the 6 boxes is 6 spelled out, S-I-X, boxes spelled out. There's no space in between, .com. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take us home. One key takeaway, if you can include that in the text chat, I also refer to this as an ego boost for myself and my co-presenter, Mike. If you didn't like us, yeah, you can put that too, but we like to go home tonight feeling good about ourselves.
Yeah, I really do hope that everybody on the call saw one thing either as new information or as a good reminder that maybe has you thinking about something you're working on a little bit differently, or maybe planning your next project a little bit differently. And if there's something like that, please share it in the chat.
And Mike and I are just thinking of taking this presentation on the road, so no, I'm kidding. While you're doing that, providing any of your key ahas, I do also want to remind everyone, hold on, to keep in touch with us. We're all over the place, and we try to post various thought provokers throughout the month, not just advertise our upcoming events. Our website is ispimi.org. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and we're on LinkedIn. And then I also included at the very bottom of this page the international website, ispi.org. Tons of resources on performance improvement in all of those areas. Mike had also advertised our upcoming event on May 19th. That will be in Troy, Michigan. Anything else you want to say about that?
So, I mean, for those that have never been to a practitioners forum before, just ask any of the regular chapter members how much fun it is and how cool it is. Generally, we have a mix of 99-second presentations, so really concise, really quick. What can you share in 99 seconds that's really meaningful and will make an impact? And then also we do roundtable, Cracker Barrel type discussion. So in 20 minutes, at a roundtable, somebody will share a tool or a technique or a method or a tip, or maybe relate a recent project experience, so that everybody else can kind of learn from it. And generally, with the roundtables, we like to request that there's some sort of a walkaway, a tool or a technique or a list of resources that participants can use later on. So if you haven't been to a practitioners forum, definitely look forward to seeing you in May.
And thank you, everybody, for your participation this evening. We've really enjoyed spending this time with you. And reach out to us if you have any questions, either at an upcoming meeting, or you can also find us through LinkedIn and Twitter. So we look forward to meeting with you, hopefully in person next time. So have a wonderful night, and we will be sending out a recording as well as a survey to this. Please don't expect it until Monday. I will be without a laptop tomorrow, but we will get it out to you. So enjoy your evening.